Have you ever argued a point and later realized you were not defending truth? You were defending your identity? Have you ever felt absolutely sure, then a single detail exposed how fragile your certainty was? You may not realize it, but that moment is the exact border between thinking and performing intelligence. Critical thinking did not disappear. It was replaced by something that feels smarter, sounds confident, and is actually mental decay in disguise. And here's the part that should bother you. There are 7 levels to this collapse. But there's one point, level 4, where most minds quietly stop evolving. Not because they're weak, because crossing it feels like losing yourself. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through the 7 levels of critical thinking, not as a theory, but as a mirror, so you can see precisely where your thinking is being hijacked, why level 4 breaks most people, and what it actually takes to reach the kind of clarity that can't be manipulated. Level 1. Passive consumption. This is where most thinking now begins, and where it quietly ends for many people. Passive consumption is the lowest level of critical thinking, not because it's foolish, but because it requires no effort. Information enters the mind without resistance, evaluation, or friction. It's absorbed, not examined. At this level, beliefs are borrowed. They come from headlines, short clips, confident voices, and repeated phrases. I heard, I saw, they said. These statements feel harmless, even responsible. After all, everyone learns from somewhere. The problem isn't learning. It's never checking. Modern life is designed to keep people here. Algorithms decide what you see before you decide what to think. Trends tell you what matters before you've had time to ask whether it should. Authority figures, influencers, and institutions package opinions so smoothly that they bypass scrutiny altogether. The mind doesn't weigh ideas. It scrolls past them, nodding quietly. This level feels normal because it feels efficient. Delegating thinking saves time and energy. It removes uncertainty. It offers the comfort of alignment, being on the right side without the discomfort of investigation. Most people don't experience this as laziness. They experience it as staying informed. But there are early warning signs. Beliefs become vague but emotionally charged. Arguments rely on repetition instead of understanding. When questioned, the response isn't reasoning, but reference. That's what everyone knows. Over time, the habit of evaluation weakens. The mind becomes receptive, but not selective. Passive consumption doesn't make people wrong all the time. That's what makes it dangerous. It makes them certain without knowing why. And once certainty replaces curiosity, thinking has already begun to decay, even if no one notices yet. Level 2. Emotional reaction. If level 1 is passive, level 2 feels active, and that's why it's more seductive. Here, people don't just absorb information, they react to it. And reaction feels like thinking. Strong emotion creates the illusion of mental engagement, even when evaluation never happens. At this level, conclusions come first, and reasons are gathered afterward. A headline triggers anger. A clip provokes fear. A post confirms resentment. The emotional response arrives instantly, and the mind follows it like a loyal servant. If it made me feel this strongly, it must be true. Feeling becomes evidence. Outrage replaces analysis. Moral certainty replaces curiosity. The louder the emotion, the more convincing the belief feels. This is why arguments at this level are rarely about facts. They're about alignment. Who's right? Who's wrong? Who's good? Who's dangerous? Once those roles are assigned, thinking stops. This is also where identity fuses with belief. Opinions aren't held, they're worn. To challenge the belief is to threaten the person. Disagreement feels like an attack, not an exchange. That's why conversations at this level escalate so quickly. The mind isn't defending an idea. It's defending a self-image. People feel intelligent here because they feel awake. Emotion creates urgency. Urgency feels like clarity, and clarity feels like insight. In reality, the mind is moving fast, not deep. Speed replaces depth, and certainty replaces understanding. Social media turns this level into a feedback loop. Emotional reactions are rewarded with attention, likes, and visibility. The most outraged voices rise. The calmest thinkers disappear. Over time, emotional response isn't just encouraged, it becomes the default mode of engagement. At level 2, thinking hasn't disappeared. It's been overpowered. The mind is no longer asking what is true. It's asking what feels right. And once that shift happens, the descent accelerates. Level 3, confirmation thinking. This is the most deceptive level of all because it looks like real thinking. People here read, research, argue, and explain. They cite sources. They use logic. They sound informed. And yet, the direction of thought is already decided before the investigation begins. At level 3, the mind doesn't ask, what is true? It asks, how do I prove that I'm right? Information is no longer consumed passively or reacted to emotionally. It's filtered. Evidence that supports the belief is collected, amplified, and remembered. Evidence that challenges it is dismissed, minimized, or never encountered at all. This is confirmation bias at work, but in a more sophisticated form. Skepticism becomes selective. Claims that align with existing views are accepted with minimal scrutiny. Claims that threaten them are interrogated relentlessly, or rejected outright for minor flaws. The standard of proof shifts depending on which side the evidence appears to support. This level traps intelligent people more than any other. Raw intelligence, verbal skill, and education don't protect against it. In fact, they often make it worse. A sharp mind can build elegant justifications for weak ideas. Logic becomes a weapon, not a tool, used to dominate debates rather than refine understanding. That's why this level feels advanced. There's effort involved, there's structure, there's confidence. People here often see themselves as critical thinkers precisely because they argue well. But arguing well is not the same as thinking well. When reasoning is only used in one direction, it stops being inquiry and becomes performance. At level 3, beliefs harden. The mind becomes skilled at defending itself, not correcting itself. And that's what makes the next transition so rare. Because moving beyond this level doesn't require more intelligence. It requires something far more threatening. The willingness to turn that same skepticism inward. Level 4, self-doubt, the great filter. This is the point where almost everyone disappears. Level 4 isn't harder in an intellectual sense. It doesn't demand more information, faster reasoning, or sharper debate skills. What it demands is psychological courage, and that's why it functions as a filter rather than a step. Up to this point, thinking has always moved outward, evaluating claims, judging others, defending positions. At level 4, that direction reverses. Here, the question changes. It's no longer, are they wrong? It becomes, what if I am? That single shift destabilizes everything. At level 4, a person begins to question their own beliefs with the same seriousness they once applied to opposing views. Ideas that felt solid start to feel provisional. Arguments that once brought certainty now raise unease. The mind encounters evidence it can't easily dismiss, and instead of attacking it, something pauses. That pause is self-doubt, not insecurity, not weakness, suspicion of one's own certainty, and it hurts. Because beliefs are rarely just ideas, they're identities. They signal who you are, who you align with, what you stand for. Questioning them feels like pulling a thread that might unravel the entire self-concept built around them. This is ego injury, not as insult, but as structural damage. The internal story of who I am loses coherence. That instability is terrifying. At this level, people often feel unmoored, Conversations become uncomfortable. Familiar arguments no longer feel satisfying. Certainty evaporates, but clarity hasn't arrived yet. The mind exists in an in-between state, no longer confident, not yet grounded, and the human psyche is deeply averse to that kind of ambiguity. There's also a social cost. Doubt doesn't perform well in groups. It doesn't earn applause or validation. While others speak in confident declarations, the person at level 4 hesitates. They ask questions instead of delivering conclusions. They resist slogans, and that makes them seem unsure, disloyal, or even weak. In many environments, certainty is rewarded far more than accuracy. So, most people retreat. They return to level 3, where beliefs feel sturdy again, where arguments are clear, where identity is reinforced rather than questioned. The discomfort fades, replaced by familiar confidence. From the outside, nothing looks wrong. From the inside, thinking has quietly stopped evolving. That's why level 4 is the great filter. It's not a lack of ability that stops people here. It's the intolerable cost of doubt. Crossing this level requires accepting that being wrong is not a failure, and that certainty is often a sedative. Very few people are willing to stay awake long enough to find out what comes next. Level 5. Structured reasoning. Those who cross level 4 don't suddenly become more opinionated, they become more precise. At level 5, thinking stops being reactive and starts becoming principled. Beliefs are no longer expressions of mood, identity, or allegiance. They are provisional models, held carefully, tested repeatedly, and revised when reality demands it. This is where first principles thinking takes over. Instead of starting with conclusions handed down by culture, media, or group consensus, the mind breaks ideas down to their most basic truths. What is actually known? What assumptions are being made? What must be true for this belief to stand? Thinking moves from surface arguments to structural understanding. A key shift at this level is the deliberate separation of facts from narratives. Facts are treated as limited, incomplete pieces of reality. Narratives are recognized as interpretations layered on top, useful for meaning, but dangerous when mistaken for truth. Someone at this level can acknowledge a compelling story without surrendering judgment to it. Emotional regulation becomes essential. Not emotional suppression, but emotional containment. Feelings are allowed to exist without being permitted to steer conclusions. A person can feel anger, fear, or sympathy, and still delay judgment long enough to think clearly. This restraint is what prevents reasoning from collapsing back into reaction. Mental consistency now matters more than rhetorical skill. Beliefs are checked for internal contradictions, not just defended from external criticism. If a principle applies in one situation, it must apply in others, even when doing so is uncomfortable or socially costly. Convenience is no longer an acceptable excuse. Perhaps most importantly, thinking at level 5 becomes independent of group validation. Agreement is no longer required for confidence. Disagreement no longer feels like rejection. The mind stops asking, "Who agrees with me?" and starts asking, "What holds up under scrutiny?" This is the point where thinking gains stability, not because it's rigid, but because it's disciplined. Level 6. Long-term thinking. Level 6 is where thinking escapes the present moment. Most minds are trapped in the now, evaluating ideas by how they feel immediately, how comforting they are, or how well they fit the current emotional climate. At this level, that reflex weakens. The mind begins to ask a harder question. What happens next? And then, what happens after that? This is long-term thinking, the ability to trace second-order effects and delayed consequences. A decision is no longer judged by its immediate benefit, but by the chain of outcomes it sets in motion. Solutions are examined not just for what they solve, but for what they quietly create. Comfort today is weighed against instability tomorrow, Most societies fail at this level, not because leaders or citizens lack intelligence, but because short-term relief is far more popular than long-term responsibility. Policies that feel compassionate or decisive in the moment often carry costs that surface years later, when accountability has already faded. The same pattern plays out in individual lives. Choices that reduce discomfort now frequently mortgage clarity later. At level 6, responsibility begins to outweigh popularity. The thinker becomes willing to hold positions that are unpopular, inconvenient, or misunderstood if the long-term structure depends on it. This requires mental patience, the capacity to endure uncertainty, criticism, and delay without reverting to impulse. There is little reward for this kind of thinking. It doesn't generate applause or urgency. It often appears cautious, even cold, but it preserves systems rather than exhausting them. Once the mind learns to see beyond the immediate emotional payoff, returning to shallow reasoning becomes difficult because the hidden costs are finally visible. Level 7. Integrated thinking. Level 7 is not louder thinking, it is quieter thinking. By this stage, logic, emotion, ethics, and context are no longer competing forces. They are integrated into a single, disciplined process. The mind doesn't swing between extremes, it calibrates. Emotion is no longer treated as an enemy of reason, nor as its guide. Feelings are recognized as information, signals to be understood, not commands to be obeyed. Logic is applied with awareness of human limits and moral weight. Context tempers certainty. The result is balance, not paralysis. At this level, the most noticeable change is restraint. Knowing when not to react becomes as important as knowing how to respond. Silence is chosen over impulse. Delay replaces urgency. The need to express an opinion dissolves unless expression serves a purpose beyond ego or identity. Thinking here is no longer performative. There is no urge to signal intelligence, awareness, or moral alignment. Arguments aren't used to win. They're used to clarify. Often they aren't used at all. The thinker understands that not every error needs correction, and not every truth needs announcing. Very few people reach this level because it offers little external reward. There is no validation, no certainty, no belonging guaranteed by it, and fewer remain here for long. Integrated. Thinking requires constant self-regulation and humility. But when it's sustained, thinking becomes precise, calm, and difficult to manipulate because it is no longer driven by reaction, fear, or the need to be seen. Critical thinking was never rare because it's difficult. It's rare because it's costly. It asks for more than intelligence. It asks for restraint, discomfort, and the willingness to stand without certainty for long periods of time. Most people don't stop thinking critically because they're incapable. They stop because it hurts. Because doubt fractures identity, because clarity often arrives without comfort, and because the deeper you think, the less easily you fit into crowds built on confidence and noise. Thinking deeply isolates you from easy answers and shared outrage. It pulls you away from slogans, from certainty, from the relief of belonging without questioning. Over time, it becomes quieter, not because there's less happening in the mind, but because there's no longer a need to perform understanding for others. Intelligence isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't rush to correct, convince, or dominate. It waits. It observes. It moves carefully, knowing that most damage is done not by malice, but by unexamined certainty. So, the question isn't whether critical thinking is dying. It's whether you're willing to carry the weight that keeps it alive. Without applause, without reassurance, and without the comfort of knowing you're right.